Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Nick Files. I'm your host, Nick Muley. Um, before we, of course, before we get started on the slideshow, as I think many of you guys know, we're going to be picking up from where we left off from last week, involving the Herman family poltergeist. I did actually find some additional information about this case not long after I did the show last week, which I really wish I could have had, for part one. But fortunately, I do have the information about this, so I will be presenting it. But before we get into this, let me, because we were talking a little bit about the movie Poltergeist last last week, I figured it was appropriate because this is part two of the same case to have the trailer of the sequel to Poltergeist, if you will. So, but just before we do, let me give a quick shout out. What's going on? What's going on, Cheyenne? Good to see you. Okay, now let me just share this. Let me just get to the sharing screen really quickly. Just need to make sure it's working correct. So, give me 1 second here. What the hell is all this? Okay, hopefully this is correct. I've never seen this before. All right, so let's start off with the trailer, of course, with Poltergeist 2. Wait a minute. Okay, all right, here we go.
Let me in. What the hell? Won't you leave us alone? You are gonna die!
Poltergeist 2, The Other Side. Okay, so now that we've seen this, I actually do have the third one as well, but we're gonna watch that one just a little bit later today. So what we're gonna do right now, let me share the screen once again. Again, I always have this issue with sharing the slideshows. Let's just pick up on what we were talking about with the actual case, and there's only really a page that I was able to find additional information on. So right after that, because we kind of already covered the entire case with the Herman family poltergeist, we're actually going to be more or less focusing on the supposed curse that follows the movies that was based off the real case, which was the Poltergeist trilogy. So give me 1 second. Let me get the additional information. I will have to skip a few slides while we're doing this. Let me find it first. Okay, so there's only two slides that we have to look at for the actual case. So bear with me for just a second. Okay, we got about 8 people watching. Okay, cool. Oh, damn it. Hang on. Having another one of those technical issues. Let's try this again. All right, so the additional information I got here is right here for the Herman family case. Uh, what's up, Robin? Gotta love those technical issues. So, as a result of what we were talking about last week, like I said, this is something I really wish I could have had, but this is kind of a the results of what they did for that investigation at the Herman house. back in 1958 was that a 45-page report by Pratt and Roll was published in the journal Parapsychology in June, comprehensively logging, categorizing the events, and describing the actions and statements of the people involved. It goes on to discuss physical causes, fraud, and paranormal psychological aberrations, aberrations, I guess that's how you say it, as potential explanations. Pratt and Roll note that a variety of tests carried out by experts during the occurrences ruled out physical causes. High frequency radio waves. A neighbor with a radio transmitter was found not to have used it for several years. In tests, showed no unusual radio waves. Unusual ground movements. An oscillograph detected nothing remarkable during the 3 disturbances that happened while it was present. Yeah, thanks, Robin. Foreign matter in the decapped bottles. Police lab tests found none. The electrical malfunction. All equipment was checked by electrical experts and found to be in good order. Other malfunctions. Tazi found no connection between the electrical system and appliances function and the disturbances. Downdrafts from a chimney. Installing a chimney cap did not stop the occurrences. Problem with air circulation. Storm windows in the cellar were removed to no avail. Changing groundwater levels. A well near the house was checked, and there had been no change in the previous 5 years, and maps showed the house had not been built over water. Structural problems. An inspection by the town showed the house was structurally sound. Vibrations from airplanes at a nearby airport. Flight times did not correlate with disturbances. And vibration in the plumbing. Inspections showed that it was slightly compared with a neighbor's house where no disturbances had occurred. Pratt and Roll concede that many of the logged incidents could, in theory, have been faked by Jimmy or Lucille, either when they were alone in the house. Jimmy was alone in the room where the occurrences took place, when his whereabouts could not be confirmed by anyone else, when the effect could have been staged jointly with Lucille or by himself alone, or when the incident consisted only of a noise. More difficult to account for, in their opinion, were occurrences that were observed by a third person when neither child was in contact with the object, although these two, they suggest, could have been carried out by an audacious trickster, assuming that the third person had been distracted. However, they argue that none of these objections apply to 17 of the incidents in which the position of the children was known to some other person to be such that they definitely could not have been thrown, pushed, or similarly upset the object in question. They note that Jimmy was harshly grilled by his father and Tazi, but stood firm in denying it throughout the entire period of the disturbances, even when distressed to the point of tears. The authors agree that some incidents that appear difficult to explain might have been achieved through the employment of skillful conjuring. On the other hand, they point out that Jimmy had never displayed an interest in magic tricks, and they consider it unlikely that an illusionist could hurl objects with such force undetected. On the remote assumption that he had learned magic in secret, they investigated the possibility that the 23 bottle poppings might have been achieved by someone with a basic knowledge of chemistry by creating gas pressure sufficient to blow the screw cap off. Their experiments showed that the pressure created by an appropriate chemical agent placed in a screw top container does not cause the top to unscrew, but escapes from around the lid or bursts the container. The idea that the series of disturbances was a story invented by a family. Sorry, just checking comments. Invented by the family would not account for incidents witnessed by non-family members. Pratt and Roll argue Pratt and Roll argue and raises the question of why the family would have involved the police. They further note that the two reporters who witnessed incidents and who appeared to them to be cautious and alert observers, skeptical about a parapsychological interpretation, were apparently convinced that no other person involved with the case unearthed anything suspicious. Following their departure, Pratt and Roll wrote to encourage the family to sit for lie detector tests, arguing this would be in their best interest and would also help the investigation. However, the suggestion was declined, apparently because of the parents' reluctance to subject the children to it. The investigators favored, although not conclusive, explanation is what they term recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, RSPK, on the part of the boy, a hypothesized repressed psychological force that expresses itself in the unconscious performance of violent physical acts. They argue that this is supported by the incidents focusing mainly on 12-year-old Jimmy and the pattern of the pattern of incidents suggesting motivation on his part, but difficult to interpret in terms of trickery. What's going on, Brad? Good to see you. What's up, Tom? Elaborating on this in a 2003 paper, Roll observes the most of the disturbed objects belong to the parents or happen in their spaces, and that psychological studies showed that Jimmy had strong feelings of anger towards his father. The fact that the bottles were mostly of products used by Mrs. Herman further indicates that the boy had unmet dependency needs, Roll suggests. Roll also notes that that measurements showed a decline in the number of movements correlating with distance from Jimmy, in effect that he found in other similar cases, 3 of which he himself investigated. For Roll, this supports a proposal by parapsychologist William Joynes that RSPK manifests in the form of waves, producing a decline in effects due to distance. Roll further notes a theory proposed by parapsychologist Harold Puthoff that an object may be freed from gravity inertia if the RSPK agent affects the universal proliferation of random electromagnetic fluctuations, 0-point energy ZPE. If PK waves can convert to some other kind of energy while penetrating the ZPE, I can't say that one. The sunlight, it's the sunlight converting to heat as it passes through water. PSI wave energy could convert to kinetic energy. Roll argues causing objects freed from gravity inertia to move. Roll also suggests testing for the involvement of electromagnetism and the quantum mechanical concept of observer participancy. Now, to kind of put it to a close with this case, the Seaford case is one of several of the poltergeist type to be considered by Milbourne Christopher, an American stage magician, in his book Seer, Psychics, and ESP 1970. Christopher writes that he offered to help the family get to the bottom of the disturbances, but was turned down by Herman, who said in no uncertain terms that he did not want a magician in his house. He also notes the refusal of the family to sit for lie detector tests. Christopher, contacted by reporters and photographers, later demonstrated how the events might be faked by conjuring tricks and misdirection, and repeated the tricks for Pratt, who he claims was unable to see how they were done. In one instance with visitors present, he created the effect of bottles opening and spilling their liquid by having his wife, unseen, simulate popping noises, having moments earlier overturned the bottles in the bathroom. He also describes how a thread can be used to make bottles appear to fall without anyone nearby. Skeptic ghost hunter Joe Nickel expands on the trickery theme in his 2012 book, The Science of Ghosts. Having obtained access to the 60-page police file, he notes that the events mostly happened when Jimmy was nearby and not when Jimmy was away, either in the house or in the other location. He notes also that the perpetrator appeared keen to avoid being observed. For instance, objects that the detectives dusted with a powder that would later show up under ultraviolet light were not disturbed. He further claims that witnesses might have been mistaken or distracted, and that his analysis of each movement of objects suggests, in each case, simple trickery, such as a boy could affect. According to Christopher, the Seaford incident was the most discussed poltergeist case of the 20th century, publicized in countless newspaper stories, radio and television broadcasts, and innumerable magazine articles in many languages. The publicity led to renewed interest in such cases among parapsychologists. Pratt and Roll investigated a similar reported phenomenon in 1971, in which souvenir objects appeared to propel themselves off shelves in a Miami warehouse, and Roll was also present in a widely publicized case in Columbus, Ohio in 1984. Okay, so we already went through this because, again, like I said, I had to put these two other slides. You know what? No, you know what? What I'll do is I'll go through this again because I know not everybody was watching last week, so we'll just continue as well. You know what? Yeah, we'll just carry on then with it. The Herman's experience eventually inspired the 1982 movie Poltergeist, directed by Tobe Hooper and written by Steven Spielberg, who originally was to direct the film, which has a very similar story with a young suburban family experiencing strange things going on in their home. Although the haunting is ramped up for the drama and scare factor, it sounds similar to what the Freeling family goes through. A young happy family moves into a new suburban home with their children and quickly notice disturbances, noises, bent utensils, objects moving about. When the activity increases, they seek help from a local university's parapsychology department, who comes to investigate the house. Eventually, fed up with the lack of resolution and the disappearance of their daughter, they seek out a psychic who helps them cleanse the house. Obviously, Poltergeist is more sensationalized than the story of the Hermans. Some aspects of Poltergeist, however, weren't necessarily taken from the Hermans case. The porcelain clown, for example, was from Spielberg's own childhood, as was the tree outside the house. There are physical apparitions, Native American burial grounds, body chopping portals, and skeletons popping out of the swimming pool. Basically, the Herman story laid out the basic framework of a family being plagued by an unseen force, but that's it. Their home wasn't built on a former cemetery where they moved the headstones but not the bodies, though the Herman story was never fully explained. Screenwriters Mark Victor and Michael Grace investigated the story when Spielberg, who originally wanted to direct the movie, discussed the case with them in the Life magazine article. Now, I know I read this too last week, but for those that didn't see it, that weren't watching last week, this was quite exciting. This is actually kind of a throwback to one of my other slideshows. Amazingly, the Herman's Poltergeist experience only took 5 to 7 miles from the site of the house that became the basis for the Amityville horror franchise. A fact that surprised show host and paranormal investigator Katrina Weidman. I always keep saying Weidman. Long Island is a hot spot, and I believe it's because any place where they once were a lot of Native Americans seems to have a lot of paranormal activity. Weidman told HuffPost Weird News. The house was located at 1648 Redwood Path, Seaford. This is at the other side of where the greatest number of Indians were killed on Long Island, from where the famous Amityville house is located. The two houses made famous by the two separate movie series are basically just a few minutes drive from each other. The great number of Indians were killed near the corner of Merrick and Cedar Shore Roads in Massapequa, I guess that's how you say it, by John Underhill in 1653. In both the Amityville and the Poltergeist cases, an angry Indian chief was killed. This killing was done on behalf of the Dutch. The most famous Sachem chief of the Massapequa Indians was Sachem Taka Pasha, I think that's how you say his last name, who sold a large part of the area in 1658. Some point to Taka Pasha as being the angry Indian chief that caused the disturbances in what became the Amityville Horror and later Poltergeist. Which does actually make kind of does make sense. Now, believe it or not, even though this has now occurred almost 65 years ago, I did find out, and I know I explained this last week, it turned out one of the Herman children is still alive today. Considering that was 65 years ago, I would probably put her in her 70s at least. But as far as, which is Lucille Herman. As far as Jimmy, I have no idea. I couldn't find any information about what his whereabouts are, or if he's still alive today. Of course, I'm sure both Mr. and Mrs. Herman have passed since. But in a recent interview, the daughter, Lucille Herman, says she hasn't even seen the original Poltergeist, nor have her adult children. I never saw Poltergeist. I'm not even sure if my kids have seen it, Lucille told HuffPost Weird News, and described the events as I felt I had my own nightmare. But when I was back in the old neighborhood, it all came back. Nothing had changed, except the roof of the house. Back in 1990, the owners put a second story on the house. That made it easier. There was no emotion. But while her experience is a part of horror film history, it's not a part of the Herman family's lore. Explaining it is very difficult, Lucille says. Whether the Hermans were telling the truth or not is, at this stage, irrelevant. What it inspired is more important. Poltergeist has gone down as one of horror's finest entries and become a modern classic. Unlike Popper, the Poltergeist, that's something that can be proven. All right, so now that we've actually kind of, let's see here. Tom has a question. Wasn't the Amityville house originally in another location? Was moved to Ocean Avenue? Tom, I'm not entirely sure if it was in a different location, because the actual house itself was built back in 1924. So well over a good almost about 50 years before even the murders occurred. The only thing I could really think of for any type of moving the house was when they did the film. When they did Amityville 3D, the house that they used for the same house that they used for the two previous movies was being used for the third one. It was originally designed to be picked up and moved over one lot, but they were able to shoot all the movie footage they needed just before the house actually was moved to a different area. So I know the movie house was, but I don't think the actual Amityville house ever was actually moved. Okay, so now that we're pretty much at this point where this is really where part 2 begins, now we're going to be focusing on the supposed, because we talked about the real case. Now we're going to talk about the supposed curse that follows with the Poltergeist films. So, obviously, starting with the first one, the film is also said to be cursed. Stars Dominique Dune and Heather O'Rourke. Both passed away very young, and other mysterious activity was reported on set. One can't speak truth to the curse, but it's definitely a story that follows Poltergeist more than that of the Hermits, the real people who loosely inspired the film. The Poltergeist trilogy curse, also commonly known as the Poltergeist curse, is a rumored curse attached to the Poltergeist trilogy and its crew. The majority of the fuel for the alleged curse stems from the deaths of multiple cast members. In total, 4 cast members died during and soon after the filming of the series. Two of these tragic deaths that occurred between 1982 and 1988, the 6 years during which the 3 films were released. They were highly unexpected and puzzling, leading many fans to speculate on the trilogy's eerie implications. There was also the fact that other abnormal occurrences happened during the filming of the 3 films. It is unsure that this means that the curse is true or it is merely a coincidence. The rumor and surrounding deaths were explored in a 2002 episode of E! True Hollywood Story titled Curse of Poltergeist. The legend of the so-called Poltergeist began the same year the first movie was released. Though coincidence is a much more likely explanation than a curse. Oh, it already says this. Been 4 deaths among the cast set. Okay, I already wrote that down. I don't really need to say that again. I'll get that removed later. What happens in these movies is truly the stuff of nightmares. But to many, it's what happened in real life to some of the cast members that's, it's the same thing, far more tragic. Though 2 of the deaths were foreseeable, expected, even 2 others were not. It's the combination of the 2 unexpected deaths that lies at the heart of every rumor about a poltergeist curse. Okay, it's just kind of repeating some of the same information, but we'll just move on. So, unfortunately, we have our first victim involved in this, Dominique Dune, who played the original older sister Dana Freeling, met an equally tragic and unforeseen fate in an untimely fashion. Dune had separated from her abusive boyfriend, John Thomas Sweeney, who was a sous chef at LA's Mason and was considered a rising star at the time, and had just landed the role of Robin Maxwell in the 1983 science fiction miniseries V. On the night of October 30th, 1982, just before Halloween, Dune was at her West Hollywood home rehearsing for the miniseries V with actor David Packer. While she was speaking to a female friend on the phone, Sweeney had the operator break into the conversation. Dune told her friend, "Oh God, it's Sweeney. Let me get him off the phone." 10 minutes later, however, Sweeney showed up at Dune's home. After speaking to him through the locked door, Dune agreed to speak with him on the porch, while Packer remained inside. Outside, Sweeney pleaded for her to take him back and moving back in with her. When she refused, an argument erupted between the two. Packer later said he heard smacking sounds, 2 screams, and a thud. Concerned, he called the police, but he was informed that Dune's home was out of their jurisdiction. Packer then phoned a friend and told them if he was found dead, John Sweeney was his killer. Packer left the home through the back entrance, approached the driveway, and saw Sweeney in some nearby bushes, kneeling over Dune. It turned out that as the argument escalated, Sweeney grabbed Dune's neck, brutally strangled her for what was later determined to be 4 to 6 minutes until she was unconscious and left her to die in her Hollywood home's driveway. Sweeney told Packer to call the police. When police arrived, Sweeney met them in the driveway with his hands in the air and stated, "I killed my girlfriend and I tried to kill myself." Sweeney later testified that he and Dune had argued, but he cannot remember what happened after their exchange. He claimed he can only recall being on top of her with his hands around her neck. According to a New York Times article at the time, Dune fell into a coma while being transported to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, in which she never regained consciousness and was put on life support after the attack from her former partner. Over the following days, doctors performed brain scans, which revealed that due to oxygen deprivation, she had no brain activity. 5 days later, on November 4th, her parents consented to have her removed from life support and pronounced dead at the age of 22, just 3 weeks before what would have been her 23rd birthday. Sweeney, on the other hand, was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, sparking outrage amidst the perpetrator's family, who had hoped less serious charges would be pursued, according to a 1983 article from the Freelance Star. He was sentenced in November 1983 to 6.5 years in prison, but was paroled in 1986 after only serving 3 years and 7 months. Since then, Sweeney has changed his name to John Mora and is relocated to the Pacific Northwest. His short sentence and early release remain subjects of controversy, which I've actually heard that Dune's family, they've actually been able to locate him on numerous occasions, and they've really been doing what, even though that he's no longer in prison, unfortunately, they really have done everything that they could to try to ruin his life, which, good riddance to her family, because this guy should have still been locked up, because this was just a brutal murder that he committed on this poor kid. I mean, this poor girl at only 22 years old had basically, she still had her whole life ahead of her. That's all I got to say. And it's tragic. It really is tragic. So on to our next victim of the curse. The other two cast member deaths, while unfortunate, were not as unpredictable or mysterious. Next in the string of spooky deaths is that of Julian Beck, the apocalyptic evil preacher Kane from Poltergeist 2. In 1983, Beck had been diagnosed with stomach cancer before he accepted the role. Even though he completed principal photography for the film, Beck, however, would not live to see the release of the sequel, which would be his final film. Although he battled the cancer for 18 months, in which the crew was well aware of his diagnosis, he died on September 14, 1985, at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York at the age of 60, soon after he finished work on the second installment of the series. During the film's post-production period, and 8 months before the film even came out in theaters in May 1986, according to the New York Times. Beck's death, and this is really no surprise, honestly, when I found out about this, he's not usually attributed to the poltergeist curse. If he were the only person to die after appearing in the franchise, it wouldn't seem to be connected. So while his death is certainly unfortunate, still, because he, like many others who acted in Poltergeist, suffered from an illness or incurred other misfortune, he's often counted as evidence, nonetheless, and adds to the number of untimely deaths. And of course, some believe it even influenced his chilling final performance in a film, which is just crazy. Now, here's something else that I'm sure some of you guys might know, some of you guys may not know, but unbeknownst to most of the cast and crew of Poltergeist 1 and 2, several of the cadavers were real skeletons. In one scene, when real cadavers were used in place of props, an entire day's worth of film stock mysteriously came out completely black. Thus, a whole day of filming that cost $50,000 to $100,000 had to be reshot. Upon learning of this and concerned about the use of real skeletons on the set of the first film, which unnerved the cast, the crew demanded and oh, hang on a second, someone's calling me. It's going to have to wait till afterwards. Jeremy, I see Jeremy's comment. Yeah, Jeremy, I absolutely agree. He the first victim we were talking about. Yeah, he took that poor girl away. It's just still devastating even 40 years later. So, anyways, upon learning of this and concerned about the use of real skeletons on the set of the first film, which unnerved the cast, the crew demanded an exorcism be held on the set to ease the rising tensions, which happened soon after. Will Sampson, the Native American actor who played the shaman Taylor, as well as Chief Bromden from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, performed an exorcism on the set of the film in 1984 to clear the bad energy many felt connected to their use of real human remains. According to Williams, the night before the reshoots, studio security was instructed to leave the set unlocked and unguarded so Sampson could return late in the middle of the night by himself to perform the exorcism. Sampson performed an exorcism at 4 a.m. in order to rid the set of evil spirits and ease the tension of the frightened cast and crew, who had actually started to believe the franchise was cursed. See, Robin just said, I think you could attribute the film failure to fumes from the formaldehyde in the cadavers reacting with the chemicals in the film. It's very likely. It's kind of really hard to say, to be honest. I mean, there was a lot of unexplained things that did occur while this movie was being made. I'm just checking now through the personal profile so I can see what everyone's saying there. Okay. All right, there's just a few things. Okay, we're going to go back. So, of course, the next day after the exorcism, members of the cast supposedly felt relieved. All right, so we have next all this talk about Will Sampson, as we just mentioned. On June 3rd, 1987, the same film was met with further tragedy, which started rousing spectral suspicions. Will Sampson died of a lengthy illness after undergoing a heart and lung transplant 6 weeks earlier, which had a very slim survival rate in a hospital in Houston, Texas, at the age of 53, according to the Herald Journal. The cause of his death was ascribed to severe preoperative malnutrition, post-operative kidney failure, and fungal infection. It has been said he knew his chances for survival were small due to his weakened condition prior to surgery. Though he died about a year after the film's release, like Beck, his death was probably unrelated to the curse. Sampson had a degenerative condition called scleroderma. I think that's how you say it, which caused him to lose weight rapidly and become malnourished. His poor health caused a heart and lung transplant to be riskier than usual, and Sampson died after the surgery. While his and Beck's deaths may not seem so unusual, as both were seasoned actors well into their careers, both suffering from serious illnesses that would in time take their lives, some fans still believe they're connected to the curse. Now, I'm sure you guys are probably wondering, we already covered 3 of these deaths. I think a lot of you guys know who we're now going to be focusing on, especially, and you can kind of say this is the main focus of someone who died as a result of this curse. The most well-known death that sparked and fuels the poltergeist curse, fired to this day, was the shocking loss of Heather O'Rourke. Carol Ann Freeling, the young focal point and young angelic face of the series, was played by O'Rourke. She is one of the people most commonly said to be a victim of the poltergeist curse. Only 6 years old when the first poltergeist film was released, O'Rourke captivated audiences with her stark blonde hair, doll like appearance, and big inquisitive eyes. Sadly, not long after Sampson's death, however, she was misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease in 1987, but that turned out to be a misdiagnosis. In the third episode of Shudder's cursed film docuseries, writer and director Gary Sherman shares several memories and speaks very fondly of the young actress, saying that aside from O'Rourke's chipmunk cheeks, a side effect caused by the bowel inflammation medication she was taking at the time, she remained in high spirits and overall seemed physically fine and enjoyed her time on the set. Little did he know, or anyone else know, that something fatal was brewing within. The following year, in January 1988, O'Rourke felt severely ill again, and her health started deteriorating at an alarming rate. The symptoms were casually attributed to the flu, which later turned out to be incorrect and not immediately treated. A day later, she collapsed and suffered a cardiac arrest during the drive to the local hospital. Her heart was successfully restarted, and after being airlifted to a much larger children's hospital in San Diego, where she underwent an operation to remove the obstruction, doctors had attempted to correct and repair the acute bowel obstruction that caused septic shock, which was later believed that to be caused by congenital stenosis of the intestine, something that could have been surgically corrected had it been detected sooner. Tragically, the doctors could not save the young girl in time. This blockage of the obstructions released toxins into her bloodstream, which proved to be too much according to the LA Times. She died on the operating table on February 1st. She was only 12 years old. With only 4 months until the film's release, her death caused the studio to force Sherman to shoot an entirely new ending using a double, something the director was strongly against. He preferred that the movie not be released at all, but MGM ultimately had its way. O'Rourke's tragic end would be the fourth death of a Poltergeist major cast member in a 6-year span. The circumstances surrounding her passing rendered her death even more of a shock than it otherwise would have been, as she went overnight from a little girl who had the flu to a dead little girl who expired during a desperate operation to save her life. It's hard enough to accept that a child can die of an illness, let alone a healthy looking youngster no one knew anything was wrong with. That she looked healthy did not necessarily mean that she was. Of course, such an unexpected death would fuel rumors, especially when considered in conjunction with Dominique Dune's murder only 6 years earlier. Poltergeist 3 had yet to be released at the time of her death, leading to rumors that she had expired during shooting and a double was used to complete the picture in her place. O'Rourke's family and agent said at the time of her death, her scenes for Poltergeist 3 had been completed several months earlier, back in June. But Gary Sherman had maintained filming of Poltergeist 3 had not yet finished when O'Rourke died, necessitating script changes to complete the film in her absence. O'Rourke's character was the most frequently targeted by the film's franchise's many ghosts and demons. And actually, no, there's one more after this one. Though she wasn't the first person to die during Poltergeist's lifespan, the unexpected, shocking nature of her death made many believe that the curse was real. And I bet you guys didn't know this. Both Heather O'Rourke and Dominique Dune are buried in the same cemetery, Westwood Memorial Park. This poor kid. I mean, she really, again, she was another one of these individuals who just had so much for the future. And such a really adorable kid, and just taken way too soon. Just very sad indeed. So, unfortunately, though, unfortunately, with those 4 deaths, as much as I really wish I could say that this was the end of the curse, unfortunately, there was actually a lot more that came up afterwards. Let me just see. Robin just wrote that you could attribute the. Oh wait, no, I already read that. That was Robin's comments. So it's just absolute tragedy. Now, Cat's deaths were not the only agents of the curse proliferation, as other peculiar and creepy legends surround the film franchise. The most common origin of the curse comes from the production of the first film, which I did mention just a little bit earlier, involving the skeletons. Jo Beth Williams, who played the mother, Diane Freeling, in the first 2 films, claimed that director Steven Spielberg insisted and have used actual human skeletons as props, which they were used in the infamous pool scene in an attempt to save money. At the time, they were cheaper than artificial plastic skeletons, which I actually, honestly, I thought it would have been the other way around, certainly. Jeremy saying, not surprising, many celebrities are buried at Westwood. That is correct, yes. In my innocence and I can't say that word. I assumed that these were not real skeletons, Williams said in an interview for TV Land. I assumed that they were prop skeletons made out of plastic or rubber. I found out, as did the crew, that they were using real skeletons because it's far too expensive to make fake skeletons out of rubber. These skeletons were also used in Poltergeist 2. Though tragedy or accident, excuse me, hold on. Excuse me. These skeletons were also used in Poltergeist 2. Though tragedy or accident didn't befall her in the same way that it did many of her co-stars, Williams did report odd incidents during the filming. Specifically, Williams recalled an odd nervous feeling on set that dissipated, as I mentioned earlier, after Samson performed the exorcism. Further, she said that she'd often return home from a day's shooting to find all of the pictures in her house tilted. After straightening them, she'd return the next day to find them crooked again. Williams' claim has never been verified, but it persists to this day in the lore surrounding the film's curse. Now, Oliver Robbins, who played the middle child, the middle Freeling child, Robbie, was reportedly attacked on set by a mechanical clown. I think we all remember that scene in the movie, especially you, Jeremy, since you always love your clown stuff. In a scene which was supposed to be struggling with the creepy... So, in a scene in which he was supposed to be struggling with the creepy clown, it actually malfunctioned and choked him to near death and was unable to breathe. Because the scene was meant to show a struggle, many of the cast members allegedly thought his reaction was acting, and it wasn't until he began to turn blue that they intervened. Jeremy, I love my clowns. Thankfully, Steven Spielberg was able to pull the possessed toy off, and Robin survived the attack. Jeez, that would have. I'll have to be honest. I mean, even if I wasn't afraid of clowns, which I'm not, I really aren't. But if that was me in that situation, I'd be terrified. Not because of the clown, but knowing that this thing almost appeared like it was actually possessed and trying to strangle the life out of me. I think just about anybody would be scared. So, because of all this other stuff that went on during the production of these movies, in a popular form of the rumor, some mistakenly believed Robbins had died in a car crash. No child actor from the Poltergeist series, as far as was killed in a car crash or died just after Poltergeist 2 was completed. He is alive and well today. That right there would be enough to cause a clown phobia. Yeah, definitely, Jeremy. Of course, I found out that he's involved with the production of a documentary about the many deaths connected with the franchise as a means to lay the tragedies from this time of his life to rest. Death by clown is definitely at the bottom of my preferred ways to go list. Wow. So, moving forward, James Caan wrote the novelization of Poltergeist, so he wasn't involved with the film's production. But that doesn't mean he was, which this is actually one of the few photos I was able to find of him, but that doesn't mean he was exempt from strange occurrences. In fact, Caan reported that right after writing the line, lightning streaked the sky. A freak lightning bolt struck his building. While that might be just a very strange coincidence, Caan said that his lights went out and that video games in his house turned on and started playing. During filming of Poltergeist 3, actress Zelda Rubinstein received a call that her mother died suddenly. There were also reports on earthquakes during the filming of the third movie. After filming of the scene where the cars chase Patricia and Bruce, the car's explosion set the entire set on fire, almost taking a crew member and a few cameras he was rescuing. When Heather O'Rourke showed up for filming the next day and heard about the incident from director Gary Sherman, she was relieved that no one was hurt. She then asked Sherman, "Did you get the shot?" Well, that was supposed to show up in a fade-in. Now, Richard Lawson, I'm sure you guys may not remember who that is, but this was him. He played Ryan, the original Poltergeist film, is believe it or not, believed to be another victim of the curse. In March 1992, so 10 years after Poltergeist was made, he was aboard U.S. Air Flight 405 to Cleveland. Many passengers on board reported feeling uneasy before the flight. Lawson was bumped up to first class after a flight attendant recognized him, a chance encounter that probably saved his life. The plane then crashed into Flushing Bay after a failed takeoff with its passengers trapped in their seats. A total of 27 people out of the 51 on board were killed, including someone in Lawson's original assigned row. Lawson survived, but the event is yet another reason people claim the movie is cursed. If he hadn't been bumped up to first class, it might have been him in that seat instead. And then also, although he was not a cast member, English film director Brian Gibson, who helmed Poltergeist 3, died of Ewing sarcoma at the age of 59 on January 4th, 2004. Okay. Now, while the deaths of Dominique Dune, Julian Beck, Will Sampson, and Heather O'Rourke as seen as part of the supposed curse, get this, there is actually another death that some fans like to bring up to further pile on the evidence, but it happened 27 years after the release of the original movie. Though not often cited as part of the Poltergeist curse, the gruesome death of Lou Perryman, who played the small role of Pugsley, a construction worker in the original film, and was known for his roles in other horror films, reignited interest in the curse. On April 1st, 2009, Seth Christopher Tatum, a recently released ex-convict who had a history of mental problems, was on the run from police after a violent altercation with his mother's ex-boyfriend. when he randomly came across Perryman's home, the two having never met. So this was basically truly a break-in. He entered the home where Tatum attacked and killed Perryman with an axe. That had to have been such a gruesome death. Tatum, who later turned himself in, said he attacked the man because he needed his car and some other items from his home. Perryman was 67 years old at the time of his murder. The case was settled 2 years later when the killer, who'd stopped taking his medication for bipolar disorder shortly before the murder, was sentenced to life in prison. This was the only photo I was actually able to find of him for a case like this in 2009, which I'm sure there would have been more photographs. I really wasn't able to find any more photographs of this crazy killer. So it was definitely a very gruesome death indeed. Though Lou Perryman didn't play a lead role in Poltergeist, he is often considered to be a victim of the curse nonetheless. It's not unusual because when you think about it, you know how long it has been since it was originally released. It's not unusual for a movie 40 years old to have cast member deaths, but the abnormal manner of Perryman's death was worthy of note among the unfortunate events surrounding the film. I just want to check on the before we're actually getting kind of close to the end of this, so let me check through the comments on the personal page just to make sure I didn't miss out if there were any questions. What's going on, Jason? Good to see you. Appreciate you tuning in. And then let's see, do we have anybody on this page either? Okay. So now this is something that honestly is not fully surprising, but a year later in 2010, there was one other death as well. Actress and activist Zelda Rubinstein, who played the plucky diminutive psychic Tangina Barents in all three original films and reprised the role in the spin-off TV series Poltergeist: The Legacy, passed away from natural causes following a mild heart attack at the age of 76, according to CNN. However, her death is not usually connected to the so-called curse, as she was not exactly cut down in her prime. Rumors about which members of the cast would die next began swirling about and were more difficult to debunk before the advent of the internet. A more extreme version of the curse rumor had some claiming that every actor who played a main character in these movies is now dead. This also was patently untrue. Craig T. Nelson, who played Steve Freeling, and then, as I mentioned earlier, Jo Beth Williams, who played Diane Freeling, and Tom Skerritt, who played Bruce Gardner, are all very much alive and continue to ply their trade in movies and television shows despite their deceasedness. But, and I know we're going to basically kind of end off with this, and I usually don't like bringing up this movie, but believe it or not, the Poltergeist curse did not end with the original three films. When Poltergeist was rebooted in 2015, the remake, unfortunately, which I have not seen to this day, which I heard is really bad. Some wondered whether the stars would be safe. Although the movie was widely panned, it turns out no one has perished yet as a result of their involvement. Director Gil Kenan was actually looking for the curse. According to Kenan, he found it as he noted some paranormal phenomena during filming, and it was plagued by strange equipment failures on one plot of land. And he also reported the house he stayed in while filming was haunted by a female figure in a black dress. The figure would follow him to and from set, though it thankfully did not return to Los Angeles with him when filming wrapped. What's going on, Jill? Good to see you. Oh, you did enjoy the remake, Jeremy. Okay. Well, even for a movie that wasn't that great, I know it still managed to receive some of its fans. We'll talk about that, Jeremy. For being a remake, and as much as I usually don't like remakes, I thought this was done fairly well and was scarier. I'll take your word for it. Let me give it some thought. The location for the house during shooting, I chose because it had a strange and unnecessary feel that the houses of this particular community were built around. And we found throughout production that we had persistent and repeatable equipment failure only on that strange plot of land. For instance, lights that could turn on anywhere else in the neighborhood would blow out the second you try to light them on this plot. Keenan wrote in a Reddit MAA, also, I used a lot of aerial drone photography in the film, and the drone pilots were never able to lock in the GPS signal in this field. We would have to move 10 feet away to launch the craft. The house that I rented during filming was straight up legit haunted by a female spirit dressed in black, Keaton continued. And I became aware of her within the first few days of staying in the house. And only after I left did I receive a call from a previous owner who had moved back in, who was terrified by the goings on in the house and wanted to see if I had experienced any of it. So it was an incredible real life inspiration for filming that followed me home. To deal with the unsettling experiences while shooting the remake of Poltergeist, the Cleveland-based seer and paranormal analyzer Brenda Rose was asked to cleanse the set of evil energy. About her work on the Ontario set, Brenda Rose said, "Usually when spirits get lost, they need a bit of guidance to find their way back to their destination." Yeah, I need a quick drink. Let's see how much time has passed already. It's already 5:30. Robin still hasn't seen the remake. Neither have I, Robin. I haven't seen it. I've seen the trailer for it, but I never actually have seen the film. All right, so it's apparent there's a lot of real life deaths surrounding the Poltergeist movies. And while some like to believe it has to do with a curse, others believe it's simply a string of unfortunate coincidences. In a 2015 interview with the Daily Mail, when asked about the strange deaths surrounding the franchise, Oliver Robbins, who we mentioned earlier, so again, the same year when the remake came out, and this is what Oliver Robbins looks like today, he told them that he believes there is no curse. To be completely honest, I don't think anyone that was involved in the movie ever really took the curse seriously. There is no curse. It is just tragic coincidences, he said. People may try and connect the dots and make something out of it, but they are possibly going to make connections that probably aren't there. They do make for great spooky stories, but at the end of the day, they really aren't true. One man who was strongly against the notion that these real skeletons led to the deaths of the actors is special makeup effects artist Craig Reardon, who worked on Poltergeist. The subject of the skeletons that were used in Poltergeist, to my utter amazement, has created sort of an online mythology, and not a pretty one, said Reardon when interviewed for Shudder's Cursed Films. Apparently, there's a contingent of people out there who believe that the fact that real human skeletons were used are some kind of pretext to explain why two actresses that worked in the film subsequently died, which is not only just conceptually ridiculous, but is personally offensive to me. As Reardon went on to point out, human skeletons have been used in movies for years and years. Examples cited in his interview include House on Haunted Hill and the 1931 Frankenstein. No low-budget B film is going to pay anybody to sculpt a human skeleton when all you had to do was to go to a biological supply house and get a human skeleton. Wake up and small, I guess it's smell the budget, actually. That's really the way it worked, he added. The idea of having a few of them on the set of Poltergeist and killing two lovely young girls is a pretty pernicious idea. Perhaps one of the most famous Poltergeist characters of all, arguably only second to Carol Anne, is the clairvoyant ghost vanquisher Tangina Barrons, played to perfection by Zelda Rubinstein, who I did mention briefly. Most never consider her death part of the curse due to her age, cause of death, and how far removed it was from the close string of deaths between 1982 and 1988. And that's likely how she would want it. Much like Oliver Robbins, Rubinstein always felt the idea of a poltergeist curse was just superstitious nonsense. In fact, she found it to be downright preposterous. In a 1988 interview during the Showbiz Today segment on CNN, she candidly spoke about the curse in her signature gracious manner, but ended it on a classy yet blunt note. I owe it to Heather to present her case as most honestly and lovingly as I can. I love this child very much, and I'm still very grieved at her passing, said Rubinstein. Heather died because of an undetected congenital anomical defect. Julian Beck died from cancer in his mature years. Will Sampson passed away after receiving a heart and lung transplant. It's my understanding he had an environmental disease. And Dominique Dune died at the hands of an extremely ill-directed, passionate boyfriend. These are reasons. I do not call this a jinx. I think that it's pretty much a courtesy to put an end to superstitious crap. And that was all I was actually able to find. So to kind of put an end to it, what is seen as an unusually large number of deaths have occurred among the former cast of the Poltergeist trilogy. This occurrence has given rise to the rumor that the productions were in some way cursed due to the nature of the films themselves, as if the evil spirits conjured in the make-believe world of the cinema have since reached out into the real world to claim what they might see as their rightful victims. Because the story is explicitly about the problems that arise from disrespecting the dead, there's a pretty compelling argument for why Poltergeist would be cursed, with celebrity deaths, strange accidents, and even exorcisms taking place over the film's, well, I got to change that. It says 30-year history. Now it's 40-year history. Poltergeist's curse is easily one of the most interesting rumors in Hollywood. 4 decades after its release, Poltergeist is still finding viewers willing to enter its dark narrative with expectant eyes. As such, it's all but certain the movie will continue to be a source of nightmares for generations to come. That's at least in part due to Poltergeist's continued influence on modern filmmakers, with writers, directors, and producers alike continuing to mine the film's bone-chilling thrills for inspiration for their own cinematic fright fests. Now, I should tell you guys, although we did have the remake that came out back in 2015, which again, I know not too many people really enjoy, I did find out that they actually are actually really rebooting it once again. They are making, I guess, because of the way how the remake didn't really receive that best of reviews, they're basically making a second. It's like they're making another attempt at making a second remake of Poltergeist. So be on the lookout, guys. I know there's another one that is on the way. I do not know when it's supposed to be coming out. I think they did say that they were going to start working on it either this year or next year. But for anyone who works on this film, definitely be careful, because of if there was a lot of strange things that occur with the original trilogy as well as this remake, there's definitely no doubt in my mind that something's probably going to happen with this new remake that they're making. If it does, well, it's probably going to be added to this document and eventually to the slideshow. So we'll see how things go. And that officially concludes the final slideshow that I have for season 1. So hopefully you guys all enjoyed it. Now, let's see what everyone's saying in the comments, because I do have a couple minutes just to respond, because I wasn't really able to respond to a lot of the comments from earlier. All right, so who do we got? What's going on, Natalie? Good to see you. Pickle Tom, what's going on? Hello, Penny. Good to see you. It should have been life. Yes, he's talking about in regards to Dominique Dune's murder. Yeah, should have been sentenced to life. Let's see who else we have. Anyone else? Oh, Jill. Okay. Yeah, the remake was so-so, but still love the original more, hands down. Okay. Definitely cursed. Very likely, Jill. Probably next week I'll watch the 2 back-to-back. Let's see what else. If that best way to piss off a dead person, use the remains or skeleton. It's worse than a double dog date, I'm sure, or double dog dare. Okay. Yeah, I have to agree with you on that, Jill. I'm gonna go watch Poltergeist today. Been meaning to again anyway. It's been way too long. Hey, you know what, Jill? My suggestion: you should definitely do that, because this year marks the 40th anniversary of Poltergeist. Don't know exactly which day it came out, but I did know it came out, as we all know, back in 1982. Thinking the same thing. I wouldn't want someone swimming around in a dirty pool with my bones. I don't think anybody. Another Poltergeist is at a Blumhouse. You know what? Because I do have a couple minutes. Let me just look it up very quickly so we can find out all for ourselves. Let's see what we got here. Okay, sequels and remakes. Okay, so it says here that okay, this has been going on for a couple years now. On April 10th, 2019, it was announced that the Russo brothers would helm a new remake. But it doesn't really say. Oh, wait, here, hold on. This might have a little bit more information about this. Damn it, hang on. Yeah, they're just saying right now that the Russo brothers would make a new remake for the franchise, but they haven't really said anything else. Depends if the skeletons wanted to be acting in the movies or not. Okay, I'll give it a shot. Oh wow, I'm really left behind. I don't know. I think I'd like if someone used my bones after I die. I won't need them anymore anyhow. Might as well be useful one day. You got a point there, Robin. Or are we just conjuring the devil all over again? Yeah, it's at times it is definitely disrespectful to use real bones. And the weird thing was I never did truly find out, what skeletons these people were. Thank you, Cheyenne. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely fantastic. Nick Files needs longer slaw in the future. Well, Jeremy, that would be nice, but unfortunately, I kind of already ended my slideshow for today. But We're going to end in just a couple minutes. What I'm going to do, because last week and earlier today on today's show, I showed the trailers, obviously, for the first 2 Poltergeist movies. So I thought it was appropriate that I would show the third one. And as crazy as I was going to say, as not as crazy as I am, I'm also going to show, yes, the remake for the trailer for the remake. Just before we go, if someone's going to use my bones without my permission, I'm going to take my head off and throw it at them. The bones were from a medical supply company. They are from people who willingly donated them. Okay, so that does make a little bit more sense. All right, so now let me just get the trailer ready. So just bear with me for just a second. Oh my God. To Jeremy, let's all throw heads at them. Oh boy, here comes a conversation of throwing skulls, all the heads at everybody. All right, give me 1 second here. It's just so I can get it ready. Come on. All right. Jill's on board. All right, let's try to. Oh my God. I have some skulls ready in the background for tomorrow. Oh boy, here we go with a new conversation and idea. All right, so we'll begin with Poltergeist 3, the trailer. Here we go. Hang on, let's make sure that it's actually showing. Okay, here we go. Out of here. It's funny to think this was all shot in Chicago. Just like literally 5 years before I was born. Man, did I miss out on something fantastic. It's the John Hancock building.
Guess who's back in town?
Nice 3. He's found her. Yeah, it's not very it's one of the shorter trailers compared to the others. As long as you don't live in the states of Louisiana, Georgia, or Tennessee, you could buy real human bones for whatever you want. Holy cow. I did not even know that. That's kind of freaky. All right, so finally we're going to end with the trailer of the remake. So here we go. Look what I started.
You didn't know where else to go. You did the right thing coming here. Maddie was the first one to notice things.
Mom, how will you get here? Who are you talking to?
When was the last time you had contact with her before she was taken?
I'm sorry, Jill.
It's a fixer-upper.
All the houses are like this in our price range.
Do you want to see Jake? No way. You try. We like this house!
She even changed the name.
We can't call the cops. What are you gonna tell them?
Change the name of the character.
Your daughter is here, and she's alive. This development was built on a cemetery. This isn't just a few pissed-off spirits we're dealing with. It's a poltergeist.
We just want our daughter back.
The door to the barrel could close at any moment. If that happens, there's no getting her back. I want you all to clear your minds. They already know what scares you.
Yes. Something's wrong, Mom.
Yeah, I'm just not really too impressed with the remake compared to the original. Even if I did like the remake, I would have preferred, obviously, still with the original. Shocked you haven't caught up to the newer version. Oh my god. Shining door scene. Oh, give me a break. And Joe, that's my old-fashioned name, actually, that you just mentioned, adding the Y to my name. Anyways, to go back to what Jill said, speaking of which, look, when I start, no, that was not me that started that whole thing with the skulls. That was Jeremy that did that. That is Jeremy and Jeremy alone. So if you're wondering where that came from, don't blame that on me. All right. Yeah. For remakes, I approve this one better than other films remakes. Well, you got a point there. All right. Well, because I have nothing else really to present, I'm going to end for today. Now, for Whistles Innocently, what the hell are you talking about? Damn, I don't even know what that means. What the hell is that? I'm not even going to touch this one. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Here's Johnny So Classic. It's an absolute favorite scene. Oh, you must be referring to that picture. I have this, my current profile. All right. All right, then. All right. So, anyways, to try to get back on topic and any more of these crazy comments, they're going to have to wait until I'm done. This actually will be concluding the final slideshow I'll be presenting because for those of you that don't know, I'm actually doing my show by seasons. So with that being said, next episode for next week is going to be the final episode of the Nick Files season 1. And unlike the other episodes, though, I won't have for the final episode, the season 1 finale. There is going to be no. Oh wait a minute, son, this is still sharing. Okay, so because it'll be the final episode, there is going to be no presentation. It's actually going to be kind of like what I would call an ideas for season 2. It was the final episode 3 shows ago. No, last week was supposed to be the final one, but I ended up I had to split the presentation into 2. So anyways, next week will just be kind of like not necessarily a Q&A, but just ideas of what you guys want to have for season 2. I already do have a couple ideas already. I do have some of the documents, as well as, creating, these documents to create some of the slideshows. And yes, Natalie, yes, the final, well, I wouldn't call it the final episode, final episode. It's just the final episode of season 1. So I'm just going to be open to suggestions, ideas. I can't promise anything in particular if I'm going to be able to do that particular location, because I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of requests. Like I said, I already got some of my own. I know some of you guys are going to give me suggestions for other locations, so I'll try to do my absolute best. I know I will be back in time for the I'm going to take about at least a month and a half, maybe 2-month break before I do eventually make my comeback. I know I will be back in time for the if I'm able to do it either in the late September or early October through the Halloween season. So in fact, believe it or not, I'm not going to say what it is. I actually already have a very special presentation that I will be presenting as the Halloween special. I'm not going to give much because I don't really want to. I don't want to spoil it. But I will give you guys at least a little hint of where it is and what this place is. It's not actually a haunted location. It's a place located actually in France, and it was something that was very influential and inspired a lot of the horror genre. That's all I'm gonna say. So just do the math, and you're just gonna have to wait till October for the Halloween special. But in terms of that one, I'm open for all different ideas for next week. So I'm sure this will be a very interesting episode. So I guess I could pretty much say, get your ideas rolling. Thank you, Jill. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Mum's the word. I don't know what that means. So, all right. Well, anyways, with that, like I said, with that being said, I'm gonna end this. I know for if you guys didn't know, we didn't have me and Don didn't have our horror discussion last night because because Don was out of town, so we weren't able to do the show. For Supernatural Talk tomorrow night, we have Dave Wismer coming on, who actually is someone I did work with for a very long period of time because I actually was part of his original crew, the original Midnight Paranormal Society in Chicago. So I know we're going to be interviewing him tomorrow. In fact, he and I used to do radio shows several years ago already. Can't believe it. So it'll definitely bring back memories for me. And then, of course, as I think a lot of you guys know, for basically Friday and Saturday, I'm supposed to be heading up to Crown Point Jail with Jeremy to do an investigation. And I know one of those nights, I know Saturday for the Paranormal Giving Tree, we are going to be filming at Crown Point Jail, along with the other locations that are participating in Missouri, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. So it's going to be a great time. I can't wait for it. But until then, I will see some of you guys tomorrow. And for those who are just waiting for for the final episode of season 1, I will see some of the rest of you guys next week. So, not sure about filming now. Talk on that later. Okay. All right, Jeremy, that's fine. All right. Thanks, Jill. Really appreciate it. So anyways, like I said, I'll see some of you guys tomorrow. On Supernatural Talk. If you want to wait till the next episode, I'll see some of you guys next week. So therefore, you guys all have a great night, and I'll see some of you guys tomorrow and next week. Have a good night, everyone.